Hello everyone, you're watching Mayshad Choice live conversation. I'm Neza Alawi, founder and CEO of Mayshad Choice, the New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis. I'm here today with Jan Mercerdam, our VP Development, and Dr. Risa Ryger, a clinical psychologist and investor in Mayshad Choice. Our guest today is Carol Engel. Carol has spent the past 15 years in commercial real estate for her family office, Commander Enterprises, as well as outside clients. Her focus is on investment, management, development, construction, design, and brokerage. And Carol will give us insights on how to imagine the new workspace. Hi, Jan.
Hi, Neza. Happy Monday. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for kicking off the week with us. I'm Jan Mercerdam, Vice President of U.S. Development with Mayshad Choice. As you know, we are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, champion women professionally and personally, connecting them to each other and to the companies, causes, institutions, and organizations that support and champion equity for women in the workplace and beyond. We're so thrilled to be hosting this conversation today, all about what happens next. And as you listen through the day, please feel free to type in your thoughts and questions. Make sure to join us and follow us at joinmayshad.com. That's joinmayshad, MAYSHAD.com. Programs. Join us tomorrow for our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series. On Wednesday, we have Workshop Wednesdays. And on Thursdays, we have our Women in Money series. So thrilled and excited to be with all of you today. Oh, and also we've launched our digital memberships as well. So please make sure to log in and join us. We're together creating a brand new world under Mayshad Choice. Thanks, Neza. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you, Jan. Dr. Ryger, could you tell us a little bit about the psychological aspect of what it means to go back? What does this really mean in the sense of how the mind processes the thought of going back?
First, I would like to say hello to both of you. You all had a chance to say hello to each other, and I want to have a chance to say hello to both of you as well, and to welcome our Mayshad amazing community here today. Whether this is the first time that you've joined us or you hop in every week, welcome. We're thrilled that you're here. And so for us to arrive together and just start out, before we start taking the next step, let's just take a moment to be where we are and be in the step that we're in before we take a step into some very unknown and perhaps anxiety-provoking areas. So let's together be where we are, take a step and a breath in to connect with ourselves, and just take this moment and luxuriate in your breath and connect with your energy and with your liveliness. So we'll take our moment and just take a breath in and out. One more. Now that you got used to it, in and out. Okay. And now we've all arrived together in some way, shape, or form. So Neza, you were asking about the next step. And so could you tell us again exactly what your orientation was in this?
Well, definitely, Dr. Ryger. The question is this anxiety that comes with the next step. And thank you so much for putting us back in the appreciation of the present, because I think this is where we stand. It took us so much time and efforts to adapt to this situation that we're all full of fears when it comes to, first of all, they talk about going back. How are we going back when we're going to something that is more of the future with its uncertainties? And second of all, it's not going to out of confinement with a real solution that was brought to the table over this confinement. So my question is on the psychological level. If you could talk to us a little bit about the anxiety and the feelings that come with this, with what we're all feeling now, thinking of the going back to work and the going back to life.
This is such a great place for us to start, because and you put it so well, Neza, is really what we're doing is we're going into the unknown. We really are. This is like, in some respects, it's like stepping onto the moon. It's like we were on one planet, and in some respects, we're on another planet right now. And what makes this so different is that also this is planetary. This is a global experience, and people are responding to it in different kinds of ways. And for us who've been sheltering at home and maintaining safety, maintaining safety, maintaining wellness, maintaining self-care as best we can, we're stepping into something that we're not sure about yet. And that makes it very hard. It makes it hard to picture it. And so when we think about taking a next step, we think about, well, where is that step going to lead us? Where am I putting my feet down on the ground? And right now, we don't really know what that is. And it's not that we don't know what that is. Really, in truth and reality, nobody really knows what that is. And so we've had terminology like the next normal. Well, there isn't really a next normal. What there is if I'm going to be called into the office in 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, whatever that period of time is, depending on where you work, what is it that I'm going to be literally stepping on? Where are my feet going to be taking me? What is the ground underneath me really going to look and feel like? And wherever it is that I'm stepping on the ground, is everybody else going to know that they should wear a mask and stay 6 feet away from me? So there really are iterations of this. And so the terminology that we use, I think, is really important for us to become sensitized to, in that when we think of going back, generally what happens, we think of, well, I'm going back. But that's really not what's happening. And so we have to be more aware of that and just say, well, it's not what I will picture. This is going to be so different than what I picture, because I'm not going to go back to my desk with my papers just where they were and pick up where I left off. And maybe there are some fewer people in the office. That's one picture. So I think that one of the things that we can do is really allow ourselves to envision and to visualize what is, and to come into connection with what is it that we picture. Because we all develop a picture, right? We all develop a picture. And so one thing is, like, when we have our phones, and I'm actually, as a non-techie person, I'm very proud of the fact that I can take a screenshot. But if you could, when your mind develops that picture, has that moment of picture of what you think you're going back to, what that looks like in your mind, if you could take a screenshot of that, and then be able to hold it in front of yourself and take a look, that's a first step to being able to start dealing with what going back is. Because first off, going back is what you picture. And so to develop clarity and to be able to identify what your internal picture is such a great first step. And it's a scary first step, right? No matter what it is, because you also know that no matter what you're picturing, it's not going to be that.
So fear of unsafety, fear of others and how they're going to be respectful to the processes, fear of unknown, as you're telling us to try to picture what that can be. Do you think that we really want to go back to an active life that was as active in terms of movement? Didn't we realize that there is so much that we can do remotely now, that we were also wasting a lot of energy moving around too fast and having that stress up level built up, without, we got to a stage where we're getting those results while staying from home. So do you think that everyone will want to go back rushing?
Well, there will be people who want to go back in rushing. There will be people who feel like, when your car is in neutral, but you have your foot on the accelerator, and it's just like vroom, vroom, but you're not really going anywhere. And there are people who rev internally. It's like if you have a car and you know how your engine idles, like you can rev very high inside and feel like you just got to get out there. And at the same time, this opportunity of being here and being inside, even though it's absolutely not what any of us would have chosen, has given us a moment to, if we so choose, and this may be a good time if you haven't yet, really think through what is important for you, what is important for your life. What is it that perhaps you've experienced now being where you are that you really want to incorporate more of that? And maybe you've also experienced that what you were doing was really great and you really want to get back to that. It gives us a moment to rethink in a very deep way and in a very personally truthful way, because no one else will have your truth. No one else will have what's going on inside you going on exactly in the same way inside of them. So this is really a moment before things rev up to think through very carefully what success means to you. We're in New York. It's a driven place. I mean, there are people welcome everybody from all over the world. But this is where we're in. And so what does success mean to us? What does success mean to you? And this is a chance to kind of pick and choose and give yourself the opportunity to not necessarily be in the whoosh of what kind of everything looks like in fast motion. And you can pick up whatever you want. You can go back as much as you want, but this also is the opportunity to really develop your own clarity about what's important to your life, what success means to you, what success means to you as a person, not just in terms of your accomplishments, right? Because we work towards our accomplishments, but we're certainly more than our accomplishments. And so we get this opportunity to divine, to think through and to sort out who we are, what we want, and that we don't have to. We may want to, but we have choice as to whether or not we want to embrace what we used to embrace as success, or as feeling worthy, or as feeling competent, or as feeling like we're moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Ryger. I love your point on the fact that we should think of it individually. There was a collective decision for confinement. There is a collective decision for allowing us to go back to work, but what that going back or going to work is going to be really needs to be related to our own choice, our own family rhythm, our own personal rhythm. And we know that a lot of people were on stress, thriving for an image of success that is not, and when they got there, they realized that it is not their own definition of success. And so I love that idea. I think it's so liberating. I'm embracing it right now, just realizing that, okay, we don't have to all go at the same time. Yeah. Well, actually, you can stay in and you can live it differently and listen to yourself.
And very importantly, not be less than. It doesn't mean that you're less than. And that's something that more and more, busier and busier, doesn't make you more and more. And so it's an opportunity also to just really try on different mindsets and see whether, the clothing that you wore when you were 18 or 20 or 25 may not be the clothing that's right for you right now. So,
Risa, I'm having some really odd flashbacks right now. It's interesting what you say around, coming into it for yourself and understanding what this means for yourself and understanding that what works for you might not work for others. And I'm wondering, in so many of the emails that we're seeing and in so much of the news now, it's, when we open up again for business and all of the checklists and guidelines that are available for businesses, no matter what their size, around how to keep employees healthy and safe. But there's a component of that's missing in the sense of the emotional health, right? And so we know we have to distance, we know we have to wear a mask, we know we have to wash our hands, we know doorknobs have to be sanitized. But it seems to me anyway that there's a large component that yet hasn't been addressed for individuals, for employees, for teams. And that's just around the anguish and the anxiety and the stress that going back will cause, right?
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much for bringing that up. And one of the things that no one else can do for us, that we really do need to do for ourselves, is to be able to identify our own stress levels. And so if we think about this, if you think about stress from either 0 to 5 or 0 to 10, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what scale you want to use. And develop different types of touch points for yourself of what a 3 is or what a 5 is. And very, very importantly, this is where we don't leave our bodies behind, that we need to check in and we need to know how to check in with ourselves so that we know our own signs of when we're feeling stressed. And if we can catch ourselves and start to understand what happens with us, because we know that stress is involved with cortisol levels, and continued high cortisol levels are not in our best interest. They're not in our interest for our emotional health, and they're certainly not in our interest for our physical health. And so when we can start having these markers for ourselves, to give ourselves an opportunity to check in with ourselves and to be able to see, well, where am I? And what we're talking about, this doesn't take a long time to do. So we're talking about this. We're talking about a nanosecond. And when you talk about the checklist, it's just your internal checklist. I mean, literally, it's there's a David. My email address will be on the screen, but it's in the final process of a checklist that I've developed called Coping to Conquer. And so literally what we can do, what is a checklist that we can utilize to help ourselves develop some of the adaptability, resilience, and self-identification of what we need to do and how to be able to help ourselves and not leave ourselves behind. Even if we think we are, and even if we want to, we're going to be reminded in so many ways that we can't. And at the same time, I'd also say, well, what's on your checklist? What's on your checklist? Let us know. Like, put it in the chat. Send me an email. Let us know what's on your checklist. What needs to be there? What needs to be off?
This is incredibly interesting because I think that there's a perception that when the floodgates open, that we're all just there. Right. And so in our Mayshad Morning Brain Trust, which is a small group discussion that we host for our members, the conversation centered around, okay, so I'm not afraid about going into the office. I have an office, I can close the door, there's social distancing already in place. But what I don't really want to do is get on Metro North, for example. Right. And so there's step-by-steps that we all have to take on a daily basis, just normally to get ourselves to the office or to get ourselves to a meeting or to an appointment. And it might not be about the end result of being at that physical location, but just the journey by which we travel back and forth. Right. And so I think it is interesting in the sense of, what does your own checklist look like? Right. And really, what are the triggers for you, and understanding that might not necessarily be about what you think it's about.
And also, to add on to that, because you're on a roll here, Jen. And also that no one else knows your situation. no one else might know that there's somebody in your house who has lupus, or there's someone in your house who's immunocompromised, or that you're responsible for helping for the welfare of someone who has medical issues. And so even if you're the young, healthy person, walking around, no one else knows what you're going back to and what your responsibilities and what your concerns are beyond yourself, beyond your 6 feet. Because you've got your 6 feet, but guess what? Everyone here, we each bring our 6 feet back home with us.
Risa, what, from your perspective, from an alleviation of stress and anxiety, many of us who are watching today own our own companies. We're leaders, we're decision makers, we're responsible for other people, both professionally and personally, particularly in the workplace. What can we do as leaders to help alleviate some of the stresses and anxieties that our team members may be feeling right now around the whole notion of return to work?
One thing as a leader is to make space for concerns. And as a leader is someone who's able to really take in what's happening. In order to lead, you have to know who you're leading and what they're experiencing. If you're a leader, but you're cut off, you're removed from what it is that's happening with the people who you need to care about, they're going to feel that, and they're going to feel your disconnect. And as a disconnected leader, you can't lead. So it's very important for leaders to allow for space, particularly now. I mean, the way that we start to slowly, perhaps in some way, shape, or form, come back, we need to allow for our individual experiences. And people are very worried, and people have their own moments of panic and fearfulness, because again, this is so different than seeing that there's a telephone pole that's gone down in the street, and so we have to walk around it. We don't know what we're walking around. We can't see what we're walking around. And this is part of what makes this frightening and unnerving. Of course, we try to deal with it so that we're able to function and do what we need to do and make sure we have food in our house and make sure that things are going as they need to be for us to be able to sustain our lives. But at the same time, simultaneously, along with our functioning and our resilience and our adaptability, which is so important, there's also a part of us that knows that there's something out there that we can't see. We can't see, we can't put our finger on, we can't know how to step around it. And that can be, depending on how in tune or sensitized you are, for all kinds of reasons, that may be a continual seepage for stress for us. And so to be able to be in a work environment that doesn't shame you for that. I mean, it's not about, I'm big and strong and tough, and so that thing isn't going to get me, that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, that you can come in and be vulnerable, and that we don't have to be expected to be more than who we are at this point and more than what we can do. Generally, we do a whole lot. And what we do very, very well because we hold ourselves to high standards. And so that for leaders, that there is an expectation and a reasonableness that this is going to take time, that this is a period of tremendous adjustment. I mean, if you've sent your kid to sleepaway camp, you know that your kid's going to have a period of adjustment when they go to sleepaway camp. This is a whole other thing. I mean, when we're moving away from home now, I mean, there's the great part of moving away from home, right? Because we get to see other people that we know or we care about or we like being around or that we've shared hours and hours of our lives with. Our work relationships take up a lot of our time. The people who we sit across from, they're part of our world, and they've been part of our daily experience for a while. And so no matter what, this is a huge transition for all of us, because we're not going back into the office and seeing our dear, colleagues and our friends. We're not going over and hugging anybody. We're not, we can't then meet up at work and then go out afterwards and have a cup of tea or have a glass of wine. Like, this is not what it's going to look like. So we have to develop and go in with a tolerance, a patience, a compassion, and a humanity, that this is all in transition. This is all a period of adjustment. And that doesn't mean that people aren't trying, or that people don't want to bring it, or they don't want to bring their A game, or they don't want to come in and just make it happen. This is what transition looks like. And not only that, but this is the moment where truly powerful leadership, truly connected leadership can buy you loyalty, following, commitment beyond what you could possibly imagine. When you can connect, be compassionate, be understanding, and bring your authenticity, your credibility, and tremendously your trust with the people that you work with, you will wind up with more than you could possibly imagine.
Risa, I would also imagine that, and this is an incredible insight, thank you for sharing that, during this time also, we're not all going to be out there going back at the same time, right? And so even within the same companies, within the same teams, people are going to be staggering back in. And, I'm wondering that, given that, we have, so many of us are extroverts, so many of us are introverts, so many of us may be feeling FOMO if we're in the office and then others of us are at home, that's going to impact just how we think about corporate culture in so many different ways, right? Because we're not all going to be together as a team under one roof, at least in the short term. So I'm wondering, what advice do you have both for those employees and managers and directors and founders and owners having to manage just different groups of people phasing in and out? And then how do you create that sense of culture that a company is going to need to have to be able to sustain itself as a cohesive unit, as a cohesive entity?
One thing that comes to mind, as companies do have this challenge because they have teams that are all over the world. We're so globalized. And so it's always been a challenge for a company of how do we have someone who's in New York, who's in London, who's in Brazil, who's in Hong Kong? How do we develop a team? What does a cohesiveness look like when we're in all different worlds, different parts of the world, and on different time schedules, right? And so one of the things now is, if you have a kind of an in-group and an out-group, like the group who's in and the group who's out. And I think as women, we can get sensitized because of how girlland can be, of who's in and who's out. And so one thing is that we really have to take a look at ourselves with that and bring our own kindness. And that the other thing is that there is going to need to be some innovation, and innovation in terms of how do we stay us? How do we stay us? We've talked about it in other kinds of ways, of the them and the us, and it can be the them who are those who are at home and the us who are here in the office. And so we need to make this an us. And so one question and one challenge would be, is there some sort of ritual? Because rituals are very, very helpful in our lives, right? And so whatever the ritual is there some sort of ritual that maybe you need to innovate as a team to bring cohesiveness, so that no matter where you are, you can contribute, you can participate, you can be part of it, so that you blur that line between being in the inside and being on the outside? What can you do to make it feel more like you're in the same room? even if you're not. And some of that is going to have to come to what I talk about 93%, right? The nonverbal components of communication, right? So that how do we show up with our nonverbal communication that helps people feel welcome, that helps them know they've got a spot here, that helps them know we've got your back, because we're in this together. We've got your back and you've got our back. And that's how we need to be in an environment that has a level of trust that makes things functional. And so it may be that some of the tactics or some of the dynamics that had happened before need to be rerouted and need to be reconfigured to allow for a different kind of wholeness, togetherness, and usness to be a team so that we're literally all pulling in the same direction. And that we know that because not only do we hear it, but we can see it and we can feel it. And it speaks authentically to us.
Thank you, Risa.
Thank you. Definitely time to express our leadership and implement it. And what you're saying also, I'm just thinking of an example of, I remember being in Italy, in Venice, and the waiters were not nice, and I just said that, okay, this is not a job that you can take on if you're not going to be here and be nice to people. And so there are other jobs that you can, but if you are at that forefront of serving people, I'm sorry, but you have no excuses, but you need to put a smile and you need to be like nicer. And so I think it takes us to this example of us having that choice to stay in on some days and be productive from home and to be out. And if we're going to be out, we need to be even more sensitive to others, knowing that there is that distance effect, that there is the mask effect, that there is the uncertainties effect. And so to just find a way, even in as you're saying, in our gestures, in our feelings, to be able to express that. And we cannot, like, if you're not going to make that effort of feeling other people comfortable in the office on that day, then you have that option now to work remotely and be able to productive. So Carol Engel is joining us. Hello, Carol. Thank you for being with us today. We always, every Monday, we have such fascinating conversation with Dr. Ryger, and Dr. Ryger, we've really been tackling this whole confinement situation and going all the way, really taking it week by week and trying to understand what are all the psychological aspects that people are going through and how can we support them. So today, Carol, could you tell us, with your expertise in real estate and commercial real estate, what is going to be the face of the new office? How do you see it?
Okay. So thank you. Neza, thank you for asking me to join, and Jan and Dr. Ryger. In terms of what we were talking about before in the show, you said, where are we at? Where am I? And I think this is a question that all companies are asking themselves right now, as they haven't yet gone back into their offices and they're looking for alternatives as to how they should make that step. It's almost like a step over the cliff, because nobody really knows what it's going to be like. There are two sides of it. There's a psychological side as to how people are going to feel going back into the office. And there are many people that are not going to be comfortable with going back into the office. They're just scared for whatever their reasons may be. There are other people who have found that they're very comfortable working from home and it works for them and they've been very productive. So my advice to companies is to look at the whole pool of who it is that's supposed to be coming back into the offices and do a survey, speak with the staff, see how they feel about this whole venture of going back to the office, and start to put together a strategic plan as to how it's going to happen. How, if you're in an open office, an open workspace, a lot of offices are open now with collaborative rooms and conference rooms. How do you make everyone feel safe? What systems can you introduce into the space that will make your employees feel safe? And things that can be done from many different aspects, whether if it's a benching system, putting up partition walls, they could still be lucite, plexiglass material, so people can still see each other, but not feel like they're breathing and the next person is breathing on them. I think everyone's scared. So we have to be creative as to looking at the spaces, making sure that the space that you have really works. One of the questions has been, what's going to be instituted in terms of capacity? We're talking about restaurants going 50% capacity. Well, what about offices? How many people can be there at one time? And how do you develop a plan so that you have the right teams in the space at the right time so that you can be efficient with the collaborative work? So there are many questions, and a lot of them are still unanswered. But I think it starts with doing a survey of who you're working with and making sure that you're addressing whatever their concerns may be, and presenting a plan to everyone who has to come through those doors. It's not just the doors of the office, it's also the doors of the building. What are the property owners and managers doing to make everyone feel safe when they walk through the doors and when they walk to the elevator bank? And if you're in a huge building that you have hundreds, thousands of people entering on a daily basis, what systems are in place so that they don't have to worry about pushing elevator buttons or being in a crowded elevator? The list of questions is a mile long, and I think nobody really knows all the answers, so we just have to give it time.
Carol, sorry, go ahead.
Carol, thank you for this. It's so interesting just when we think about just the flow of people right in and out of a physical space on a daily basis. And, also just understanding from a commercial perspective, but then also would love your insights from a residential perspective as well, in terms of demographic shifts that could be happening as a result of this as well, in the sense of how people think about what quantities of people are right to bring together under a workplace, but then does that offer up new opportunities in the sense of just how people, flow between one town or one urban area to a suburban area and vice versa?
So from the demographic standpoint, we're starting to see some numbers and starting to hear a little bit more people within the industry speaking. And a lot of people have fled New York City during this time. And if they've had houses outside of the city, they've gone to those homes because they felt more comfortable there. They can get outside and breathe the air. A number of people, if they've been able to afford it, have rented places outside of the city. And there is a lot of discussion within the industry that the numbers are picking up for the suburbs. Long Island, Westchester, Connecticut, people are thinking about making the move. And what's happening with people who are here in the city who are in rental apartments, who maybe have a lease that's coming up or have a way of giving up the space that they have already started looking at, virtual viewings of properties to see what their options are, because they're scared to be stuck in a building where they don't have outdoor space and they're living with a bunch of other people. It could be condos, it could be co-ops. I think the residential market's going to have severe effects in the next several months.
Carol, you were talking about those partitions in the office spaces, which I think is a great idea. Do you think that it could be the solution for restaurants where we're sitting next to each other?
I think restaurants are really very difficult. And, my fear is a lot of the restaurants in New York City that are very small are not going to be able to open up because they're not going to be able to afford to staff and supply these restaurants. That's a difficult question to answer. It really is, as to what restaurants are going to do. I think a lot of them are going to do a lot more takeout business as opposed to people coming in and sitting down. I don't know. I mean, I think we all have to ask the question, are we comfortable going into a restaurant and sitting across from somebody or a table next to us that we don't know where these people have been, what they've been exposed to, and also the wait staff serving food? How do we really have food security in those situations is a big question that we have to ask.
And Carol, I would like to share with the audience, you were one of the first one to self-quarantine yourself because your husband has a low immune system. So you're used to those processes. So definitely, would you be comfortable going to a restaurant if there was just less people inside?
No, I wouldn't. I haven't been out to dinner since February 27th, and I miss it, but it's going to be a while till I go back to a restaurant.
Thank you, Carol. So we're going to go to the questions from our audience now. Jan, do you have the questions or?
I do. We have a lot of really good questions coming up. And please, everyone who's watching at home today, please feel free to type things in and send us your thoughts and feedback and questions for Carol and for Risa. Our first question is around the most recent demographic shifts in some of the big urban areas around just communal spaces, and how for such a long time, apartments, condo buildings were offering incredible amenities in the sense of gyms, rooftop lounges, pools, co-working spaces, often in your condo building itself. Will this change from the perspective of how people feel comfortable, even in a big building, even if you're social distancing, but just knowing that some of those amenities now may not feel as secure as what they felt in the past?
Well, the amenities for the existing buildings, they're not going to change, but what's going to really change are the systems that are put in place in order for people to use those amenities, because the building management's going to have to make sure that they have a better protocol. For example, a gym. I mean, pre-COVID, you walked into a gym and maybe there was a dispenser that had Purell or the dispensers that have disinfectant wipes. It's going to take more than that in terms of people going back into a gym environment. Or let's talk about a spin class. Getting people to go sit side by side, crowded, several people in a spin class is going to be very, very difficult. And how do they keep it clean when people are sweating all over the place in an hour? It's really going to change.
Our next question goes to Risa. Risa, let alone how do we start to feel comfortable around our work colleagues, but how do we start to feel comfortable around just wanting to be close to our friends and family members?
The simple answer to that, which is not so simple, is at a distance. And that's some of what is happening now. And certainly as the weather is getting a little bit better, it gives us an opportunity to be outdoors. And so everybody has to find the research that they feel comfortable with. And some of the research at this point is showing that if you're outside, if you're in good distance, masks, you have to, and again, there's no right way. There's the way that feels comfortable for you, and depending on who in your life might be health challenged, that you have to be true to yourself and find your own comfort level. But one of the things that people are doing is they're having 6-foot picnics. There are people who I know are meeting in driveways. I'm in Westchester, so there are people who are meeting in driveways, and they can be sitting outside of their cars, but down in different areas of their of a driveway, or meeting up and taking a walk together across the street from each other. And so sometimes we just need and want and just so miss just the three-dimensionality of another human being. It's even the people that, we might be Zooming with them, but there's something that just feels different about being with someone and being with them face to face, even if the faces are 8 feet apart. And so that's one way of being able to be together with friends and do it in a way that doesn't have to jeopardize or compromise anyone else's health.
Risa, I love what you just said around the three-dimensional component of all of it, because, I miss everyone at the office. We miss having live events, of course. And what I think is really interesting is that we have been able to stay connected here in a very meaningful way with our entire Mayshad ecosystem, but also knowing that that's also happening on the screen, right? And so I'm in Westchester as well, and I've seen, parents throw drive-by birthday parties for their children, which I think is really fascinating. And so I love the point around doing anything you can to stay safe, even if you're in the confines of your car, even if you're 10 feet away from someone, but start to bring those people back into your life to start to feel more comfortable with just, easing back into it gradually as well.
Mm-hmm. Even meeting up if you have the opportunity. I mean, in the city it's different, but in the city there are parks, but it's a different experience of bringing your own, having dinner together but bringing your own food and your own beverages, and that's what dinner together can look like. And there's nothing wrong with that, And so there's a way that we're not going to forget the things that we love. But there's also a way that if we can't have that, it doesn't mean that we have to have nothing. And that's important.
I'll share my experience yesterday. So I was at the park and it was Mother's Day, and I invited a friend to come over. She's a mom and she's alone. She doesn't have family around here in the city. So the idea of, so we're going to go, we're wearing gloves, mask, and then back to your point, Carol, the food security, like how can I pack things that will make her feel comfortable so when I went to shop, I just went to shop for individual snacks that are packaged. I brought in the wipes. And so it was a beautiful day yesterday. The park was full. You're surprised by how full things are getting. People are in the street. But, that's, everyone is 6 feet apart from everyone. So life and the city has enough capacity to also take us slowly at that 6 feet distance. But clearly that picnic is going to become, I said, well, it's good that we're starting to train ourselves, because that's probably our restaurant hangout for the next month. And so no, it's the question is, what is the right balance with feeling safe behind a screen, because it also brings a certain comfort. You don't feel, you have zero feeling of guilt that I have exposed myself at all, and then at the same time wanting to bring some physical humanity into your life, and how to do it with the right steps. Thank you, Dr. Ryger.
Nez, I think what you just said is really interesting as well, because it speaks to what we've been talking about here in the sense of understanding what our comfort zones are, and also understanding what the risk factors really are as well. And are there opportunities as we think about, starting to become more physically close to other people again? Is it safer to do that outside, right? Is that because there's more circulation and more airflow outside, that doing things and easing gradually into those spaces like that actually produce a lower level of risk than if we were to congregate together in a restaurant? And which is a great segue into our next question to Carol around just, the re-envisioning that restaurants and lounges and clubs may have to go through to understand the risk factors to be able to create space or safer environments for their patrons. So, for example, one question from the audience is around just wanting all those amenities and all those concierge services, but not wanting to stand in line someplace for them, right? And so there's the perspective of what is the end user's experience and the end user's journey from point A to point B in the sense of how they make a purchase and how they experience a service.
Well, how we make purchases and participate in a service is going to change drastically given what's going on. And I think for existing businesses, they're really going to have to sit down and think long and hard as to how they're going to be able to do it and make it work. For new businesses that are opening up, they're going to put systems in place beforehand. And what's hard about this is that a lot of businesses are going to find that they're faced with huge expenses that they never intended to have as a part of doing business. So hopefully there's going to be additional support and relief from our government to help the existing businesses survive and businesses that were in development. Something that could help support that as well. We have a lot of challenges to face.
So Carol, just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying and to share. So I just want to be clear that my dog got a haircut before I did. And so that my dog, my poor dog, she's got hair and she's kind of woolly. She's a little Bichon. And so I brought her, because she must love me very much. I brought her I brushed her down, and then I started to give her a haircut. And it's like shearing a sheep. And so she looks better. She does look better. I can't say that she was my practice moment, because even after that, I'm still not ready to cut my own hair. But it's one of the services, again, to your point about commercial spaces and how do we go back in? How do we get the services, and what is that going to look like? And how is commercial real estate going with innovation going to help us with that?
Well, I can share with you that a lot of the landlords that I've spoken with and developers are thinking about these things and thinking about ways to help make businesses work more efficiently and be more comfortable. But there's the whole psychological side, which you know about, that what's it going to take to get people who have been comfortable in their homes to feel comfortable going back into those places of business. And I think that we need to think of it just like when we're in our home, we feel like there's something warm and cozy and makes us want to be there. We're going to have to start putting those things into offices, whether if it's more plants or just areas that are more comfortable that people can convene but not be right on top of each other. It's really going to change the way everyone thinks in terms of the planning and design.
That's a really good segue into our next question. Two-part. Number one, are you seeing flexibility by landlords in renegotiating existing leases in this current environment? And then number two, so what's going to happen to all the buildings in Midtown that could become very empty very quickly in the sense of leases not being renewed, particularly Class A buildings?
Well, it's sort of a scary question, but I have to say the people that I've been working with and having conversations with have been very receptive to making alterations. For example, in process, involved in a lease that's being amended. And when I went back to the landlord and said, we need to talk about these things. And the questions that I raised to them were the same questions that they came back to me and said, you're absolutely right. We're trying to figure this out. So let's talk about it. And I think that's the good thing. I think we have to speak, we have to communicate. And if there's a situation where you're in a lease and you're not sure what you're going to do, but you know that your business has been impacted greatly, I think the first thing you should do is have a conversation with your landlord. I don't think you have to get a lawyer involved. I think you need to have a direct conversation with whoever it is that owns and manages the property that is in question, and have a discussion. Say, this is my situation. Chances are they'd say, okay, prove it to me. Come back to me, show me your financials, show me how your business has dropped 50% or 30% or whatever it may be, and let's try to work out a plan. A lot of businesses are working out plans. It's not just the real estate industry. Look at insurance. United Healthcare, I think, had sent out information, or it was in the newspaper this past week, about making adjustments to plans. So I think we have to speak. That's the only way we're going to get through it.
Thank you, Carol. We're going to have to end this session, but Dr. Ryger, before we finish, could you please just give up a little wrap-up and summary of all the insight that you gave us for those who were not with us from the beginning, a little like guidelines to leave us, feeling positive about everything that we talked about, and the hope of going out of confinement and having a positive experience there.
So one part as a takeaway is to be true to yourself, to really understand and be able to identify what your inner experience is, what feels comfortable for you, what feels uncomfortable for you, what your moments of success are, what your definition of success is for yourself. This is a time that you can take for you and to leave what doesn't work for you and really step forward into what does work for you. We are also talking about developing your own stress checklist, a stress way of checking in with yourself so that you can really keep checking in with your stress levels and be able to understand where you are with yourself so that you can start to bring yourself back to more of a steady state. We talked about developing your own checklist of comfort, and I've also created a coping to conquer checklist that you can get. And if you've worried that you have missed out, because we're here live, which is also, thrilling and wonderful to do, and to be here together and to share this time with Carol and how wonderful this has been, that you haven't missed your opportunity. We understand that schedules work all kinds of ways, and it's because of that we do have the recordings of these broadcasts, of these live streams available to you. So if there's anything you want to go back to, you want to rehear, we've got you covered. We understand, we get it, and we're recorded, and you can come back and repeat anything that you wish. It's really in your hands.
Thank you. Jan, anything to add?
Thank you so much. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please check us out on joinmayshad.com. Please join our membership because it gives you so many incredible opportunities, including this, but much more deep dive opportunities for in-depth conversations and opportunities to be a part of creating the new world together. Thank you, Neza. Thank you for hosting us today.